All right, everybody, today we are going to bust some myths wide open. And before we dive in, I want to say that I've done the research on these topics and I'm sharing what the science actually shows, but I'm not a doctor, and individual results always vary based on genetics, training history, nutrition, and overall lifestyle. So if you have specific health concerns, always talk to a professional. But today we're going to bust a myth wide open, and that's the if I stop training, my muscles will turn into fat, or the idea that I want to turn my fat into muscle. So both are wrong. And here's why. Muscle and fat are completely different tissues. One cannot turn into the other. Muscle is metabolically active tissue made of protein fibers, and fat is stored energy, adipose tissue. They have different cellular structures, different functions, different purposes, and they cannot convert from one to the other. But here's what does happen, and it does look like a conversion. When you stop training, your muscles start to atrophy, which means they get smaller. And simultaneously, if you're eating the same amount of calories, you might start accumulating fat because your metabolism has slowed and now you're in a slight surplus. So you lose muscle and you gain fat. So your body composition changes and it looks like your muscle turned into fat, but it didn't. They are two separate things and they are happening at the same time. So today I'm going to break down exactly what happens when you stop training, how quickly the change can happen, how to prevent it, and what actually happens with your metabolism and what the impact is. Because this fear around this myth keeps people obsessing over training consistency when they should be focusing on consistency plus smart nutrition over time. So let's dive into it. What actually happens when you stop training? I'm going to walk you through a timeline. Days 1 through 3, there's an immediate effect. You stop training, and the first thing that happens is glycogen depletes in your body. So your muscles store carbohydrates as glycogen. Without training stimulating them to use that glycogen, your muscle cells deplete the stores. So when glycogen leaves, water follows. So glycogen binds water, 3 grams of water per gram of glycogen. So every carb you eat leads to 3 grams of water. So in the first few days, you might lose 3 to 5 pounds, but it's not muscle, it's water and glycogen. So this is why people who take a few days off of training will sometimes see the scale drop or a slight puffiness when they return to training, and it's because of the water reuptake. But muscle loss has not started yet. Now, weeks 1 to 2, initial muscle loss can begin. Muscle atrophy starts, and at a cellular level, what happens is when you train, you create a stimulus that tells your body, we need to maintain this muscle because it's being used. So when you stop that stimulus, your body says, we don't need to maintain this muscle. We can break it down for other purposes. So muscle protein breakdown starts to increase, and muscle protein synthesis starts to decrease if you're not actively training. And the research shows that measurable muscle loss can begin within 1 to 2 weeks of stopping training. But here's the key. The amount is relatively small at first, which is why if you decide to go on vacation for a week or two and you don't work out, it's fine. You're not going to lose all of your progress. But the studies measuring muscle loss show that initial muscle loss of about 0.5% of muscle mass per day happens after a full week of inactivity. So if you were to take 1 full week off, then at the end of that week, you might start losing 0.5% of your muscle mass. So if you have 100 pounds of muscle, you might lose 0.5 pounds after that first week. So for someone with more muscle, the loss could be slightly higher, but the percentage is typically consistent. And this is important because most people don't completely stop training, they will reduce frequency. So say somebody takes a week off, or they drop from 4 days down to 2 days a week, the research shows that you can maintain most of your muscle with just 1 to 2 resistance training sessions per week, as long as you're lifting heavy and maintaining volume. So if you have a week where you have to miss 2 days of your lifting routine, that's typically 4 days, that's okay, as long as you're still hitting all the main muscle groups with heavy lifts and volume. Now, weeks 3 through 4, the loss accelerates slightly. By weeks 3 and 4, if you completely stop training, you might lose 2 to 3 pounds of muscle. And this is where you start to notice the loss. Your muscles will look a bit smaller. Your strength will drop noticeably, but you're not losing massive amounts. You're not losing all your gains. You are losing a couple pounds of muscle though, every week after weeks 3 to 4. Now, once we get to 2 to 3 months, so say you were sick and you had to stop training completely, and we get 2 to 3 months in, the loss slows down. And this is interesting. So the rate of muscle loss actually slows after that first 2 to 3 weeks. After that first month of time, the loss slows. So in the first week, it's a little bit. The weeks after, it gets pretty rapid, and then it starts to balance out and slow. And this is because your body starts to reach a new equilibrium. And it's not consistently breaking down muscle at a maximum rate. So someone who takes a complete break from training for 3 months might lose half a pound week 1, half a pound week 2, 0.3 pounds week 3, 0.3 pounds week 4, and then weeks 5 through 12, they might lose a pound a week. So that's roughly 5 to 8 pounds of muscle over a 3-month period of complete inactivity. And that is significant, but it's not catastrophic as long as your plan is to return to training eventually. And here's the key. Most people don't completely stop training for 3 months. They might take a planned 1 to 2 week break for vacation, maybe a month off during a life transition. And in those scenarios, muscle loss is minimal, often just 1 to 2 pounds, as long as they maintain their protein intake. But that's key. We have to keep our protein intake high to maintain the muscle mass. So let's talk about what actually happens when you lose the muscle, because it slows your metabolism. So how much slower does your metabolism actually get? And this is where the myth gets scary and where the science is a little less dramatic than people think. Everyone's heard muscle burns calories at rest. So if you lose muscle, your metabolism slows. And while that's technically true, the magnitude is sometimes overstated. So the research shows that 1 pound of muscle at rest burns 6 to 10 calories per day. So some older research suggested it was up to 15 calories a day, but recent studies show it's about 6 to 10 is more accurate. So let's do the math. If you lose 5 pounds of muscle, you're losing 30 to 50 calories per day of metabolic rate. And that's real, but it's not massive. So compare that to eating an extra large coffee drink at Starbucks, that's 250 calories, or an extra snack that's 150 calories. So the metabolic slowdown is smaller than a single food choice. So we have to remember that we're losing muscle mass, yes, if we stop training, but it's not so much that we have to drastically change the way that we're eating. So for perspective, if you lose 10 pounds of muscle mass, that's going to be 60 to 100 fewer calories burned per day. That's about as much as a slice of toast. Now, does it add up? Yes, and if you lose 10 pounds of muscle and maintain your calorie intake, you're now in a slight surplus of roughly 60 to 100 calories a day. But over a month, that's 1,800 to 3,000 extra calories, and over 3 months, that's 5,400 to 9,000 extra calories. So that means you have the potential, if you were to stop training today and not train for 3 months, to put on 1.5 to 2.5 pounds of potential fat gain. So the real story is you lose muscle and gain fat simultaneously. As your muscle mass goes down, the fat loss will go up. And it's not because your muscle turned into fat, but it's because your metabolism slowed down from muscle loss and you're eating more calories than you're burning. So those excess calories get stored as fat. So here's a question people ask all the time. If I build 5 pounds of muscle, how much extra can I eat? And the answer is roughly 30 to 50 extra calories a day per pound of muscle. So if you build 5 pounds of muscle, you can eat an extra 150 to 250 calories a day and maintain the same body weight. And that's meaningful. If you have 10 pounds of muscle, you could eat an extra 300 to 500 calories a day. That's pretty good. This is why people with more muscle can get away with, I'm putting that in quotes, get away with eating more. And people will always ask me that, how do you eat so much and not gain weight? Well, I have a lot of muscle mass. So they're not actually getting away with anything, but they genuinely have a higher metabolic rate. So their body is burning more calories at rest because they have a more metabolically active tissue in their body, muscle. So I want to address a real scenario that most people face. So you stop training and you keep eating the same. What happens? Your metabolic rate decreases from muscle loss, and now you're in a small surplus because you're burning fewer calories. So you gain some fat, and at the same time, you are losing muscle. So the result is you have worse body composition. And this is what we typically see with people because every year after you turn 30, your body naturally starts to atrophy muscle. And as you atrophy muscle, you start putting on body fat, which is why most 30-year-olds are fine, and then they hit 32 and they've gained a few pounds. They hit 35, they've gained a few pounds. They hit 37, they gained a few pounds. And lo and behold, they hit 45 or 50 and they're 50 pounds overweight. And it's because this is a natural progression if you're not lifting weights and not eating enough protein, which most people don't do by default. So you look softer, you look less defined, and it looks like your muscle turned into fat. But what actually happened is your muscle atrophied, fat accumulated, and the result is worse body composition. So you look soft, no definition, you feel weak, all of those things. So how do we prevent this? If you're going to take a break from training for a month, 2 months, 3 months, even longer, we have to reduce our calories slightly. We can't eat the same amount. If our activity is lower, our calories need to be lower. So reducing our calories may be 10 to 15%, but maintaining our protein intake of 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. That way you can minimize your muscle loss because protein prevents excessive breakdown. You minimize fat gain because you're reducing your calories, which means you're not in a surplus, and you preserve your body composition. Alternatively, we can maintain some training. Even doing 1 to 2 resistance sessions per week can maintain muscle almost completely. So if you combine that with the nutrition, potentially a slight deficit, keeping protein high, then your body composition will stay stable. So let's dive into how fat loss actually works. We're going to flip this around because the same confusion applies to fat loss. People think if I eat less and I train, my fat's going to turn into muscle. No. Here's what happens. Fat loss requires a calorie deficit. Your body breaks down fat or adipose tissue for energy, so fat gets burned away. Muscle building requires adequate protein and strength training stimulus. So these are two separate processes. But here's the magic. If you combine a calorie deficit and high protein with strength training, you can lose fat and build muscle simultaneously. This is called body recomposition. This is what we focus on in our program. We are not weight loss coaches, we are body recomposition coaches. So you're not converting fat to muscle, you are creating a deficit, so fat gets burned. You are providing the stimulus through lifting weights, so muscle is built. You're providing the material, protein, so that muscle is built. So the result is your fat goes down, muscle goes up, and your weight will stay relatively stable in the beginning as we're achieving that body recomposition, and then eventually your weight will continue to go down. And this is why the fundamentals matter. Strength training is the stimulus to build muscle. High protein is the building block for that muscle. A calorie deficit forces your body to use fat for stored energy, and consistency compounds over time. So fat doesn't turn into muscle, but the results look like the transformation is doing just that because you're losing the fat and building the muscle simultaneously, which is going to give you that lean, toned body that you're after. Now, people ask me all the time, how quickly can I regain the muscle or build the muscle? And here's the good news. If you lose muscle and then come back to training, you regain it much faster than you lost it. This is called muscle memory, and it's real. And here's why. Your muscle cells have nuclei that persist even after those muscles shrink. So when you trained hard and built that muscle, those nuclei stuck around. And even after you stop training, they're still there. So when you return to training, your body can activate those nuclei and rebuild muscle more quickly than you built it the first time. So if you trained for 6 months and you built 10 pounds of muscle and then you took 8 weeks off and lost 3 pounds, when you return to training, you can rebuild those 3 pounds in 4 to 6 weeks. So much faster than when you originally built it. And your strength returns even faster, sometimes within 1 to 2 weeks. Now here's the training comparison. So building muscle from scratch, you might build 1 pound of muscle per month with optimal training and nutrition. Now regaining muscle after you're taking time off of training, you might be able to gain 2 to 3 pounds per month. So taking a break is not the end of the world. Yes, you'll lose some muscle, but you'll regain it quickly and you'll retain the strength faster. Muscle memory is real and it works in your favor. Now here's a practical question that people ask me all the time. How little can I train and still keep my muscle? So the research shows that you can maintain muscle with as little as 2 resistance training sessions per week, or even 1, as long as you're lifting heavy, so relative to your capacity, you're maintaining your volume, your sets and your reps, and you're eating adequate protein, and you're not in a major calorie deficit. That's the biggest thing too. So if you normally train 4 days a week and life gets busy, then you drop to 2 days a week with shorter, more intense sessions, maybe pushing yourself a little bit harder, you'll maintain most of your muscle. Now the key is not frequency, it's stimulus. So 1 heavy session per week can maintain muscle for 4 to 8 weeks. Beyond that, you might start losing some, but it's slow. So this is good news for anyone with a busy life. You don't need to train 6 days a week to keep your gains. You just need to maintain some resistance stimulus. Now, people will ask me all the time, is there a difference between men and women when it comes to this? And the short answer is the principles are the same. Muscle loss happens at similar rates. Metabolism slows similarly. Regaining happens similarly, but there are some small nuances. So testosterone and muscle loss. Men with higher testosterone might lose muscle slightly slower. Women might lose muscle slightly faster because they have a lower baseline of testosterone, but the difference is small. So we're talking maybe a 10 to 15% difference in rate. So here's how to prevent muscle loss during a break. If you know you're going to take a break, what you need to do is maintain your protein. Keep eating 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. Protein is the primary factor preventing excessive muscle breakdown. So even without training, adequate protein can reduce muscle loss by 50%. The next thing is we just need to do something. Even light resistance work helps. So body weight exercise, light dumbbells, resistance bands. You don't need a full workout, just 1 to 2 sessions per week, hitting the main muscle groups. Adjust your calories. If your activity is significantly lower, we need to reduce calories slightly by 10 to 15%. This prevents fat accumulation while your metabolism is a little bit lower. We need to keep moving. Walking every day is going to help prevent the fat accumulation, and always prioritize sleep. So the bottom line is muscle cannot become fat. Fat cannot become muscle. They're different tissues with different cellular structures. So muscle atrophies when you stop training, fat accumulates when you eat in a surplus, and these can happen simultaneously, which makes it look like a conversion. So 1 week away is not going to lose all your gains, so you're not doomed if you go on vacation and skip your workouts. You can maintain your muscle with minimum training and good nutrition, but if you do lose muscle, you can regain it 2 to 3 times faster than when you built it the first time. So stop being afraid of taking breaks, stop obsessing over one missed workout. Instead, build consistency over time with your life so you can live in a sustainable way. You guys got this.